Thank you for joining our third and final Concord and Victory session with Elizabeth Woodforde, Director of michaelpage. This evening, we're talking about interview preparation and focus on how to succeed in competency-based interviews, which now dominate recruitment processes. Elizabeth, could we begin with a quick overview of different interview styles graduates and students might face?
Sure, good evening. There are a few. Virtual interview has become quite a popular one at a first stage, and probably the best known is HireView, which is used for grads and internships. Assessment centres, they can be virtual or in person, but you generally will find yourself in a group-based environment with a set of different tasks that then is followed by a one-to-one interview, typically at the end. The competency base, which is a highly structured interview, and I think we'll probably go into more detail on what that means later. And then what I call an unstructured interview, or probably a traditional interview that feels like it's a bit more of a chat about your experience. But I would say that is now probably the least used of all the different sort of interview styles that grads or students would face for roles.
Thank you so much. Almost 50% of candidates fail interviews due to poor preparation or a lack of knowledge about the company. What specific research or preparation would you recommend to candidates before an interview?
Yeah, I mean, there is a world of information about companies out there. And of course, everybody's going to go and look at the website. But sometimes I think it's the bits of the website that are useful for people to really hone in on when they're doing their research. So think about the job that you're going for. And often on a website, you've got the company information, but you've also got different areas of the business that can really provide you with extra information that you can then relate back to yourself when you're in an interview. I think make sure you look at their value and again, in interview, you'll bring out that alignment of particular value. You don't have to align yourself to every single one, but you can pick something that really resonated with you. And again, that brings out the authenticity when it comes to interview. And then make sure you look at any social media pages that they've got. Make sure you do, a Google of their current news. Make sure you look at who all of their key people are on LinkedIn, and just really familiarize yourself, because you don't know sometimes what some of the questions might be at interview, but there are so many different opportunities to show that you have done your research back to what appealed, what you found out, what you potentially can ask a question about at the end of the interview. It's that curiosity and that genuine desire to understand more about a company and evidence that in an interview scenario. So you will find so much information out there. Please use it.
Thank you so much. So another reason people fail is because they don't ask thoughtful questions at the end of the interview. What types of questions should students or graduates ask? And how do good questions reflect positively on a candidate?
I'll answer the second part of that first in terms of how it reflects positively. Again, it's about that preparation. It shows that you have done your research and you've thought about things that might not get answered in the interview when you're talking about the job and you're talking about how you match that particular job role. So it is about the fact that they'll feel that you've prepared and that you're genuinely interested. With regards to the type of questions, I think when you're looking at entry-level roles, I think a good one actually is asking about your interviewer. Yes, you can have looked them up on LinkedIn, so you could either say something that you identified on their LinkedIn profile that relates to the company and their role, and maybe a very specific question. But people do like to talk about themselves. So asking something like, you know, what's your journey in the organisation been like? What are your top 3, you know, favourite things about working for this company? You know, what do you think good looks like in this role? So again, you can relate it back to the role, but often asking about their career path is a really a bit more thoughtful and a bit more personal. Some standard questions that I still think, particularly if you're looking at an entry-level role, you know, if it hasn't come up in the interview, how do they support people? What's the induction like? Again, if it hasn't come up in interview, you can ask these questions as to, you know, how you're going to learn and develop and what training is offered and support to be successful in the organisation. I think also another quite nice question is, you know, if this is a line manager that's interviewing you, so the person that you will be directly reporting to, you can say, what does success look like for this role? I think it's quite a nice question as well, but again, it depends on the role.
Yeah, definitely. Just looking and asking about personal experiences and being more personal of the interviewer is quite useful. So research shows that hiring decisions are made within the first 15 minutes of an interview. How can a candidate make a strong first impression and set the tone for successful conversations?
Yeah, it is a really tricky one, but I think the first thing that everybody needs to remember is that when you are entering the world of work, whoever is interviewing you, whether it's in person or on video, they will allow for a certain amount of nerves. So I think if you know that, you know, you are probably feeling a bit overwhelmed by nerves, then you need to sort of find some tactics, whether it's breathing techniques, whether it's, if you know you're going to have an interview and you're naturally nervous, it's all about that pre-preparation. Jump on a Teams call, preferably maybe with somebody that you don't know that well. So whether it's a friend of a friend or a parent of a friend who can just ask you some interview questions, because then you'll feel a little bit more on the spot. So that practice is invaluable, I think, to helping you calm the nerves for when you're in a real interview situation. But please remember, there's always an allowance for nerves at the beginning, and then it's about kind of finding your flow. A couple of key things is making sure that your camera is at the right angle. The number of times I've jumped onto interviews and I've kind of either can't see somebody's eyes or the top of their head is cut off, particularly when you're doing the virtual interview. So again, it's that preparation, because then you'll just feel a little bit more confident that, you know, when everybody pops up on camera, you're in the right position. It's really, really important that you look at the camera. And that's, again, where the practice comes in, because I think if you don't practice talking on Teams or Zoom, there's a tendency to look at the screen because you're trying to make eye contact with the person talking to you. But actually, it's really important to get used to talking into a camera. And all of just those little things will naturally calm you down. And then if you've done all of the other preparation that we've talked about over this last couple of sessions, then it will just flow and it will come, and you will just, you know, be more confident. But also, you know, remember to be yourself. Smiling is also another massive tip. It automatically just lifts everybody, and if you're smiling, people tend to smile back as well.
Thank you. So these are really helpful physical cues about interviews, especially with virtual interviews. So 65% of interviewers have rejected a candidate due to poor eye contact or body language. What are your tips for coming across as confident and professional, especially for younger candidates who may be nervous or new to interviews? You did say smiling, that's a huge tip. So are there any tips you could offer us?
Yeah, smile first. That preparation and that research will shine through. Remember, they're not trying to trick you. They're trying to get the best out of you. for an interview. So I think some of it is that preparation mindset. So again, doing the practice with people on video, getting in front of people that maybe you don't know so well, even if it's even if it's in the context of school, and going and talking to a teacher who maybe doesn't know you at all, but asking them to sit down with you and ask you a load of questions. So you're putting yourself in those unfamiliar situations before you get into that real life situation, but also you're doing it in a safe space. So I think, preparation and practice is the key to when you then, have to do it either in a virtual situation, a video situation, or in person.
Thank you so much. So you did mention about getting nerves at the first 15 minutes. 73 of job seekers say job hunting is one of the most stressful experiences they've faced. What advice do you have for managing nerves and performing well under pressure, especially in high-stakes interviews? You didn't mention about breathing, so do you have any further advice you could give us?
Yeah, so I think the thing is, I feel as nervous doing this to you lot as I probably do in any other part of my day job. Hopefully that hasn't come across, but that's because I prepared. I went through all of the information that I was given about what was going to be useful to you guys in terms of those tips and tricks. I think the other really big thing is practicing speaking slowly. So it's but it's also just getting used to managing the pace at which you talk, and getting in those role plays with people. It is invaluable, but it's also knowing that it's going to take time. You will be incredibly lucky if you land the first job that you apply for, depending on the field, obviously, that you're in, and what you're doing from an application point of view. So it will be numbers game, and hopefully actually your confidence will grow as you get more practice at it. But I think that practice in those safe spaces with either your peer groups, any mentor that you can find, is going to be invaluable to taking the stress out of it.
Thank you so much. At the beginning, you did outline what a competency-based interview is. 85% of employers now use competency-based interviews as part of their hiring process. What are these, and how do they differ from traditional ones? And what's the what's your top tip to prepare for them?
Sure. So a competency-based interview is a structured interview where actually every candidate that is going to be put into that process will be asked effectively the same set of questions. So what a competency-based structure is technically supposed to do is level the playing field. So everybody gets asked the same structured set of questions, which is assessing your skills. In the first instance, we talked in last night's session about technical skills. So what do you bring to the role that you can evidence, whether, I think I mentioned kind of coding, or that you've had responsibility for copywriting, so they are tangible skills that relate to the ability to do a role. And then there's behaviours, or the soft skills, based on your past experience, which again might be around, being collaborative. It could be excellent communication skills. So those are the softer skills that they will also test. And typically, in a competency-based interview, it starts with, can you give us an example of a time when? Have you got an example of how you've managed conflict? And so it's all about examples based. And the classic structure for answering a competency-based question is called the STAR approach. So situation, task, action, result. That's the framework, but you're trying to prepare your answers in more of a story style response to a competency-based question like that. And actually the situation bit is really, really important because you're setting the scene and that's the start of your story. And then the other pieces around the task or the action might be quite quick, because I think people worry about talking for a really long time with the star-based examples, but actually it depends on the type of question you're asked, and you might set the situation, get to the task of what you had to do quite quickly, and then it's the action and the result that take a bit longer to deliver in your example. But yeah, please practice a star style structure to your interview, to your competency-based interviews. And a traditional interview tends to be more CV based, so it probably feels a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more conversational, but then that can be quite dangerous because it feels like you're just having a nice chat with somebody. Whereas you actually have to think that it's still an interview. And so even though they might say, oh, talk me through your CV, that's not literal. You are going to signpost them to the experience in your CV that is relevant for that job. So you might say something like, oh, well, let me tell you about this situation in my experience. So you almost take them into the star-based answers so that although it's a conversational interview, you're actually giving them some relevant information from your experience that relate to the role that you're interviewing for. Because a chat is great, and bringing your personality to interviews is really, really important. But equally, you don't want to leave that interview and that person just think, oh, they were really nice, but I'm not sure what they can actually do for my job. They did, it was just a nice chat. I didn't really get anything from them. And that's quite hard if it's a sort of a traditional CV-based interview. You just got to remember that when you're talking through your experience.
Thank you. So you did mention about perfectly preparing for interviews, especially competency-based ones. Would it be helpful, do you reckon, to draft a perfect answer with example questions, since these questions are all quite standard? Or do you think a conversational one and an informal one, like a traditional interview, would help more?
Oh, I think the problem is, unless you're lucky, you don't know what questions are going to come up at interview. So I would always, my tip there is you will have a job description. Okay, so this is where AI can come in handy. You can plug that job description into AI, whichever tool is your preference. You'll have the responsibilities within that job, and then you'll also have what they call the person specification, in terms of the skills and experience and behaviours that they're looking for somebody to be able to evidence to be able to do the role. So I would plug that in and ask AI to come up with some competency-based questions that you might be asked to interview. And then that is quite a useful way to then kind of prepare some of your examples. So you're not necessarily going to get exactly those questions, but it's definitely based it on the role that you're going for, and so it'll give you a good indication, and then you are able to use that star format. And yeah, I would prepare star-based answers, even if it's going to just be a kind of quite relaxed CV-based interview, because I think it just helps you actually retain the key things that you want to get across to show that you can do the job that you're applying for. So I would say having those prepared. There isn't a perfect answer necessarily to when you've got limited experience, but I think showing that preparation definitely, it will make you feel more relaxed, it will make you feel more confident, and that will come across at interview.
You did mention AI and how talking in front of a parent or a friend might help. Do you reckon talking to AI to prepare for an interview will help as well? Because I know they do voice memos in AI now.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be honest in the fact that I haven't tried it as a solution. So it might be something I look into. The general sense I get is that it's really sophisticated in how it can help you prepare, but I don't know how sophisticated it is in making it feel like it's an interview situation. So I would probably be more inclined, if you know that you're going to I'd be more inclined to practice on Zoom or Teams, just talking into a camera, even if it's a virtual interview, like a higher view interview that you're preparing for, than potentially using AI, because I think it will still sound really artificial, whereas actually it's written word feels much more natural. So yeah, I think as it improves, and probably by the time you guys actually get to sort of do more formal and corporate, style interviews, it will probably be an absolute win. But at the moment, I'm not sure. Test it and see what happens.
Okay, thank you so much for all these advice. I'm so glad to meet you again, and thank you for the advice.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, and good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.